So who's going to control these, right? So you mentioned in the EU. In the EU, they just say, this is how much we're going to pay.
Yes.
We were talking about the NICE, the National Health Service in Great Britain, and they do it very much on what they think the benefit is, and when the cost comes in under a certain point, that's when they'll allow the drug to be approved. They do it under the guise of saying it's clinical outcomes, but it's not. It's the economic outcome based on wherever it is. And there's one drug which they denied when it first came out a couple of years ago, and then 2 years later said, okay, we're now going to allow this drug because of new data. There were no new data. They cut the price. And so it fell under their curve. I mean, so are the payers the equivalent here? Is the insurance industry the equivalent to trying to control these?
We have limited ability to do it as well. Yes, we can do some draconian things like create, first-line therapies that you have to fail, which make it difficult for you. We can try to aggressively contract a bit, and if the value is not there, in other words, that outcome over cost equation is not there, we can make it harder for those drugs to be used by putting more steps in place. I don't believe that that's the right answer. It's a pretty blunt instrument, but it's what we have to work with now.
So what can we do at the population level, right? You've been stressing that you're working at a population level. What can we do as clinicians who deal with individuals with MS with your population data to try and answer questions that would get at the heart of this matter? Who's actually affected long term?
I think some things we'd like guidelines, and I know they've not been forthcoming in MS, but to the extent that the clinical expertise, and there's a lot of it out there. I mean, I admire, the expertise in the MS community. It's a complex disease and a difficult disease, and I've met many MS experts all over the country in my travels, and you all struggle with those problems. Getting some guidelines, even if they have to be consensus and we don't have all the evidence. That could be helpful because we line up behind those in a heartbeat, much as we've done on some of the things like the ACR guidelines for RA. A lot of plans have embraced things like treat to target in RA where, you're doing composite measurements every 3 months and changing the drug based on those composite outcome scores. If we had, and I know MS doesn't lend itself to that quite as well, but we'd certainly line up behind you in a role like that.
I also think that I found it interesting, and I think it's definitely the right direction to go to, that you are looking for other markers that maybe could absolutely talk about, the direction that the patient should go into, who would work, what medication worked better with certain patients.
This is a major research push in the field of MS. We'd like a diagnostic biomarker. We'd like a better disease activity biomarker. You have different classes of disease-modifying therapies. It's likely that certain MS patients might respond better to one than the other. You'd like to really pick the optimum for the individual, and you'd like to be able to tell quickly, not wait for the relapse or the development of disability, irreversible harm to the patient to figure out this drug isn't working. You don't want to continue that. So that's a major search at this time.
And I think the other really, I found it, again, interesting and definitely, you stated something at the very beginning talking about, so inflammation we know is one thing, demyelination, but inflammation throughout the whole course and the fact that it may be different inflammation.
Yes.
And I think those are the real right tracks to go down, to really try to get somewhere.